Technical journals, magazines, comic books and advertisements are now well-known source material for an artist working in the pop idiom, art which is now selling for extraordinary prices. But in 1952, the reaction was different.
It was a shock. If you can think back at that time, it was really new, and it didn't have any patina on it of vested interest or glamour. It seemed very, very unusual, really, and was a shock.
Born in Edinburgh in 1924, Paolozzi has always been concerned with modern culture as it actually affects us. He is, in fact, a realist who knows that most of the images deep in our imagination come from daily experience of television, films and magazines.
There was a kind of shape, too, growing up in Scotland, even if you didn't have much money, of drawing aeroplanes. And it was a period of a lot of cheap magazines like Hotspur and Wizard, which also gave away cards, which became rather part of one's life, because one would journey miles to see rare examples of the unknown cards, like famous tortures or war inventions. And also there's an awful lot of pulps around. A lot of movies around. There were thousands of small cinemas that one could go to for a penny and tuppence and threepence. And also, a lot of these now considered classics. One was seeing the Flash Gordon serials were around and all that for a penny on Saturdays. That was the culture then. But I made the great mistake of showing a lot of these drawings done from, say, magazines and cigarette cards to the Edinburgh College of Art to get in. And I was let in on the understanding that one could forget all that and get on to real art. The culture I came out was very dismissive about art, you know. And it's no use saying high art or Renaissance art. I mean, it meant nothing to them.
The art movements which meant something to Paolozzi were Dada and Surrealism. He admired their refusal to define art, to put a frame round it. And he was drawn by men whose style of living and style of art were one and the same.
One had the same attitude as they did, that it was a sort of life activity, it was a kind of lifestyle, you know, and it wasn't monolithic in the way that the art world has become now. That you did a lot of things for fun, and you gave a lot of things away for free. And I think a lot of the lessons in Dada and Surrealism have still got to be absorbed and manipulated.
One lesson Paolozzi has clearly absorbed is the use of ready-mades. Things that already exist, whether they're clippings from magazines or objects he's found. This wax Batman was cast from a soap bottle found in an American drugstore.
I mean, if you really believe in the ready-made syndrome, if you really believe in it, you realize that going down to Smith's in Sloane Square, you go through, if you're reasonably honest, say you go through 50 magazines, flipping through them any day of the week, that it's much better than going to the Tate. That is what actually exists.
The Science Museum is a much more interesting place for Paolozzi than any art gallery.
What I find horrifying is that society is thinking in such a monolithic way that it can only recognize art within the diagram of art, that it can't recognize art outside that diagram. I thought it was a logical way, if you wanted to make metal sculpture, to work it in engineers, because there's a big difference between making a metal box in the old style. You had to make it in plaster and then it's cast. You wait 6 weeks and pay £50. Whereas if you wanted a box made at an engineer's, it can be made in the same morning and cost 12. It's more instant, it's more direct.
One of Paolozzi's methods for making sculpture is unusual. He has a series of basic sculptural elements cast, and then he plays around with them, improvising, trying these basic elements in different orders or patterns, until by chance or design he gets something which pleases him. At this stage, he has it made up by the technicians working for him. Paolozzi is like a contractor in this respect. He employs the skills of a variety of technicians, screen printers for his graphics, welders for his sculpture, to fabricate his ideas.
Well, general engineering, as we do here, is mostly done to a very high standard. By a high standard, I mean by the limits. The limits are pretty fine. Whereas with Eduardo's, I mean, with all due respect to his sculptures, a quarter of an inch doesn't matter, so long as the finished product is as he intended.
Do you like them?
Well, yes. I mean, I don't know anything about art. I don't profess to, but having been on it for the last 5 to 6 years, I can appreciate it, and I can see that it's done for an end.
The end Paolozzi has in mind is that we should look at the products of our technology with new eyes, because he feels they express important truths about our culture. For him, these weapons, aerial bombs, have powerful associations.
Crips.
I think they were too heavy for any aircraft of the day.
That's what I thought.
They're massively built.
No, the bombers were getting very big by 1918. German and English.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not enough for me to do the bomb. I mean, it has to have some kind of connection, which might be autobiography, in the same way Crazy Cat or Mickey Mouse on the sides of aircraft doing funny things. I mean, they're kind of born out of a crazy American surrealism, which seems to be part of the American way of life, which is un-European. One uses these icons because they're more powerful, really. Maybe one is limited by the fact that one reads immense sociology into them. You see, the Flying Fortress has got the pin-up girl on the side, but it's also got that high school kids, and it's got bellies that are full of hamburgers, whereas with Lancasters, you're on a different syndrome of English sensibility and semi-digested bacon and eggs.
Robots are another feature of the 20th century that appear again and again in Paolozzi's work.
I suppose that I've picked up the robot the same way that Matisse has probably picked up the exotic pretty girl, really. It's probably an object that one's in love with, or involved with, or one reads pathos into. And it's got as much strength, the robot, the 20th century robot. What I feel about that is what churchmen might feel about the Christ image, really. It's my substitute for the Christ image.
Robots appear in a series of etchings Paolozzi has recently completed. It's his portrait of the modern environment.
It's science and fantasy in the world of technology. And there is a kind of deliberate mix-up between the real and the artificial. One of the ideas is that I don't think that society is that geared up to completely functional life, that there's always funny things around the reality. I'm just trying to recreate that whole kind of normal 20th century schizophrenia, which is that everything is kind of monitored and flattened out to a whole series of images that fall into their own lack of logic or logic, like the cathode ray tube, in a sense. In a way, I find that ordinary mass media is very, very deadpan, and you can actually see the horrific thing if you want to. It's like reading the Sunday newspapers. People are so conditioned to the magazine format that they don't think it's extraordinary that you have 6 pages in the Telegraph supplement on going away, and then you have 3 pages on Vietnam. That seems to be quite acceptable. Nobody writes a letter of protest and say, what's going on here? Isn't this split personality newspaper? I think that modern experience is one big collage, and it's a bigger collage if you're aware of it. I think the schizophrenic method is the normal method now for 20th century life, really, and I mean, this is the only interesting art, mass reflectives, in my opinion.